Hello, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, what's going on in the UK? Politicians are accusing employers of favouring cheap foreign workers, and government-sponsored billboards have been called racist vans. Have the latest anti-immigration campaigns in the UK gone too far? Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for all of your live feedback. Malika, I was in London the week that the so-called racist vans or the immigration mobile billboards were going around London. Right. And it was a huge story then and a huge story online as well. Right. What's our community saying?
That is kind of one of the fascinating things about this story, is that so much of it is taking place online. Now, of course, there's the racist vans aspect, but the UK's Home Office has also sparked controversy with its Twitter account. I pulled it up on my screen here. It's tweets like these. They've been live tweeting arrests of what they call suspected immigration offenders, and they'll blur the face, but that still made people pretty angry. So they're tweeting their anger to us, to AJ Stream. These are all the people tweeting us right now about this topic. And one that caught my eye is from Ben Chalice. He says, "The Home Office recently has made me ashamed to be a white Brit. I don't recognize the UK if it means random police stops and racial profiles." Of course, we want to hear from all of you. So whether you're in Britain or anywhere else, join the conversation using hashtag AJStream.
Malika, I have to ask you something. If we get too inside cricket, you will help me out, okay?
I will let
Pull
you
us
know.
back. Make sure we stay international. Now, Twitter isn't the only way that you can stay in the stream. This is your show, and we love hearing from our community and the stories that you're following. So share them directly with our team, and their Twitter handles are on our About page, and that's where I am right now. You can scroll down here. You find my Twitter handle, Malika's, and then all of our producers as well at stream.aljazeera.com/about.
Hi, my name is Sajin Kwak. I'm an activist, researcher, and graduate student here in Seoul, South Korea, and I'm in the stream.
The arrival of more than 3 million migrants to the UK has put pressure on politicians to tighten immigration policies. This comes at a time when crisis-driven austerity is fueling resentment of immigrants who are accused of taking jobs and abusing welfare. In the past, anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK has tended to focus on South Asians and Afro-Caribbeans, but now it's also focused on Eastern Europeans, whose numbers have increased significantly following EU integration. So today, what's behind the growing anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK, and is the real problem a broken system? Joining us from London is Stephen Wolf. He's the Financial Services Coordinator for the UK Independent Party, which is calling for very strict immigration policies. In our Google Plus Hangout from London, we have Kiri Kankwende. She is a blogger and human rights activist and an immigrant to the United Kingdom. And Ella Vine is chair of the Thurrock Eastern European Community Group and works to raise awareness about the unequal treatment of immigrants in the UK. And finally on Skype, Liam Marshall-Ascough. He's a councillor for Crawley Borough in North London and a member of the Conservative Party. It's good to have all of you here in the stream. I am going to start with a picture. This is the mobile van that was going around London a couple of weeks ago when I was there, and it is about immigration and asking illegal immigrants to actually call or text, and the UK government will help them to get home. So I saw that and I was kind of surprised. Kiri, what was your reaction?
Well, I didn't actually see the van in person, but when I saw the reports of it, I was shocked and horrified. I would add that it happened at a time when, as you mentioned earlier, the UK Home Office Twitter account was tweeting about suspected immigration offenders being rounded up with pictures, and also at a time when the government was floating all number of immigrant policies like a visa bond and all sorts of other things.
So Liam, the reason this was such a huge story was that people immediately dubbed it the racist van. How did you see it?
I don't think it's necessarily racist. What it's actually saying is, are you here illegally? I mean, we do this, the BBC do this when they go around with vans and poster campaigns to get people to pay their TV licence. So it's actually asking the question, if you are here illegally, then it's time to go home. There are a lot of people who are here, actually are trapped here, especially in London and parts of East London, who are living in sheds and awful conditions, who want to go home, but they don't know how to get home and they need help. This is part of that sort of system to help people and to highlight what we can do as a government and as a country to facilitate people going back, because whatever they're doing, they are breaking the law.
Well, it's interesting you said that. Liam, Ben here agrees on Twitter. He says UK immigration policy doesn't reflect the feelings of most British people. Racist bans, etc., are embarrassing for most. But Stephen, on the other hand, we have Sheikh Riaz, who tweets in that no country has a perfect system. The UK has a reasonable immigration policy, but its Home Office is understaffed and can't execute. So were these bans and this policy in general, is it a reasonable response to a problem of immigration?
No.
Is that?
Stephen, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's to your viewers who are actually blogging, Twittering and emailing, I think they've got to make a clear distinction that we have two distinct immigration policies in this country. The first of the immigration policies is that you have an open door immigration policy from all of the European Union members, which means that this country cannot control or stop any of the individuals from those countries coming to here. And secondly, we then have a visa-based system for the rest of the world. And unless the people of the world understand that distinction, they can't really get a full grip of the discussion and debates that are going on at the moment.
See, Ella, I heard you piping up and you said no. Why did you say no?
That was me, actually.
Kiri, sorry, Kiri. Why did you say no?
I agree with the person who tweeted that, obviously the UK border force is understaffed, but I question whether driving a van around, and it's important to stress that this was driven around mixed areas of London. It wasn't driven around the whole of London. There were only a couple vans. They were driven around mixed areas. It was inflammatory. And I question if it was the best use of immigration resources. And to go back to what Stephen said about having the two different policies in the UK, this van had languages, South Asian languages on it. It was clearly designed to target Black and Asian migrants. And granted, it did
Absolutely,
say illegal immigration. Yes, and it did target illegal immigrants. Well, that's what it said. But when you drive it around a mixed area, it's offensive to everybody there. Residents who are British residents, legal migrants, and people who are undocumented for any number of reasons.
Kiri,
Liam?
sorry, Kiri, can I interject on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead,
Because
Liam.
I was
Sure.
going to say, I mean, the leader of the Sikh community actually said that these bans aren't racist. They are actually helping people who are trapped. There are a lot of people who came over to the United Kingdom hoping to be able to work. They haven't been able to work. They're living in impoverished conditions. Reality, they want to go home. But say that for instance, he was speaking about the Indian consulate. Takes such a long time to get their visas back into, so they can get their passports to get back to their country, that it's taking forever. This sort of thing is just highlighting it. It's not raising problems. I think by not talking about it and not dealing with the problem, you're actually causing more resentment from other communities.
See, Liam, I don't think our international community will be aware of this, but the UK has a history of certain ways of speaking to people in a way that's not necessarily complimentary in terms of immigrant communities coming to the UK. So in the 50s and the 60s, it was
Yes.
Blackies go home. In
Yes.
the 70s and the 80s, I heard, and it doesn't matter what kind of brown you were, but it was Pakistanis go home, and it was a shortened form that I find so objectionable, I'm not even going to use it. So it was that go home, regardless
Yes.
of where you came from, South Asia. So when you see a government van in the UK going around London saying go home, this doesn't create a good atmosphere. Can I suggest that to you, and what would you say?
Yeah, I agree with the whole thing of saying about, the go home side of things. It can sound incredibly offensive with its connotations of the National Front in the 70s and the 80s. And, I remember again in Croydon, some of that was pretty horrific and really,
It's
really
horrible.
I
We
was
grew
only a
up in the
kid.
same part of London, and it's a horrible, vicious way to put that out there, right?
Awful. But
Okay.
the other side of it is, where would you say to go? If you can't say go to China, go to France, go to Germany. You have to say go somewhere. And for me personally, I would obviously go. I'm going to go home.
Well, it's funny that you asked that. You said, well, where do you go? Samia has a kind of a tongue-in-cheek answer. She tweeted in, I heard go home, and she used the term "paki" frequently in the 70s in London. In the 80s, I learned to respond like you did when you colonized my country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, I went to school with a lot of people from lots of different backgrounds, and I know for myself, I mean, it didn't really bother me at all, and I'm lucky that I grew up in that way. That race didn't bother. My friends are my friends. I don't care where they're from. But it is that I do understand the sort of go home thing. But it is, you've only got a short space on that billboard to get some message.
You could also
and go. Sorry, go on.
Who was that?
But I think it's embarrassing, isn't it?
You could also.
I'm sorry.
Who said you could also? Just continue your sentence.
My name is, it's Kiri.
Kiri, go ahead.
I just wanted to
Sorry,
say I
Kiri.
appreciate that there's not much space on the hoarding, and I'm glad that you appreciate the connotations of the go home phrase. But given that the analogy that keeps being used is of helping people to get home, wouldn't need help be slightly better? Anything but go home. If it's about helping people, wouldn't it be more useful to have areas where people go as a community, have those resources there for them there? But driving a van around with that emblazoned on the side, I'm afraid I question how much. I know you said that it's been helping some people. I'd be very interested to see the figures that prove that.
Liam, do you know, because the government, the Home Office was saying that it has been successful. It was just a pilot campaign. It ended very quickly. Do you have any figures? Do you know how successful it was?
Well, I think it's. Well, I don't think there are any figures out that shows how it's successful. I think really, and I'm bless Liam, really, for trying to defend really what is the indefensible. It's an embarrassment for this country and for this government to actually have signs that they did months ago, which were saying how bad Britain was, so that Romanians and Bulgarians couldn't come here, and they were trying to frighten them off. Now you've got vans that have these connotations in the past, and I remember as a mixed race person with a black and a grandmother that was Irish, we used to have signs in Manchester that said no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Now this isn't as bad as that. The signs aren't racist, and I will agree with that. But what it isn't dealing with is the issue of immigration. The government recognises it can't do anything with the major cause of immigration in this country, which is Europe. So it's really attacking communities and embarrassing Britain in doing so with these particular vans. It's the wrong thing to do.
Stephen.
You should put it in a sign and move it away.
No,
Leave it
I'm sorry,
alone and
Stephen,
start
Stephen.
addressing the proper policies of immigration.
Stephen, take a pause.
Stephen,
Liam?
would you not say that it's actually wrong and an embarrassment for your party and for this country to have an elected MEP referring to an African country or to an Asian country as bongo land?
All right, let me explain this. He
didn't actually refer to
Stephen,
any
hold
country
on a
as
second.
bongo land.
Stephen, hold on a
think
second.
he
This is an MEP from your party, from the UKIP party,
Yeah.
and he was speaking at an event about UK aid. And let me just
Yes.
play the clip so everybody's on the same page. So he was speaking about an event. He was speaking at an event about UK aid going overseas to developing nations. His name is Godfrey Bloom. This is what he said just quite recently.
Economy. It's everything that affects our lives, and we've been let down time and time again. And how we can possibly be giving £1 billion a month when we're in this sort of debt to bongo land is completely beyond.
So he
Divine
said
rate
he
bans.
calls overseas countries bongo land. I've been watching your Twitter feed, so you've been actually taking on this critique of one of your own MEPs. The inference being that
Yes.
basically the UKIP party has racist members amongst it, and your immigration policies are racist. I don't want to talk about bongo land necessarily, but it's the broader idea that maybe racists are in that party. How would you address that?
Well, I disagree with that fundamentally. If you look at our MEP list, the candidates that want to stand as the MEP, you will see a vast number of people there from different backgrounds and countries. And indeed, the MEP that you're talking about, Godfrey Bloom there, is married to a Pole. Nigel Farage, our leader, is married to a German. There are many people in our party from different races. But I disagreed with Godfrey on the language that he used, because what it did do is actually move the conversation away from a very valid point that he raised, was about the £1 billion a month that we were spending on overseas aid. I would not use that phrase. I think people of our generation wouldn't use that phrase. I don't believe he was racist in doing so. I just think it was the wrong phrase at the wrong time.
To come in there as well, he did say that he didn't regret saying it, and also that it would double his vote. So you're, saying the wrong thing, and that he wasn't being racist, and that it was the right thing to say, and you said it was the wrong thing to say, but nonetheless, he said it would actually double his vote.
Gentlemen, I'm going to move the conversation along.
Liam,
Stephen and Liam, I'm going to move the conversation along. Hold on one second, gentlemen.
If you listen to the Radio 4
Gentlemen, I'm
interview-
going to move the conversation along. Stephen, I insist I move it along because it's not about this conversation. It's not about
Thank you,
Bongo
Simon.
Bongo land. It's not about racist vans. It's really about immigration policy in the United Kingdom. Malika.
And as part of that immigration policy, Ella, I want to bring you in here with these two tweets. People are asking about the root of this, the fears. As Yana says, in tough economic times, people somehow tend to think that immigrants are stealing jobs and resources, which is total nonsense. And on Google Plus, Michael says there's been a mood of anti-immigration ever since the expansion of the EU in 2004, with the fear that many people from Eastern Europe would use the EU rules to come over and claim benefits and take jobs. This never happened, but the mood has stayed. So can you talk to us about some of those underlying fears and the fear that some people have that immigrants are taking jobs?
Yeah, that is actually not true. There has been research recently done by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is called International Migration Outlook 2013. And the figures for the UK are actually looking quite good. The net contribution of all immigrants in the UK is on plus, and if we take it without pensions, because immigrants in the future will be receiving pensions, the net contribution annually it's over £7 billion. It is actually £7.337 billion. If we take that net contribution figure without pension, that figure is much higher, and it is actually 16.269 billion pounds. That is a huge contribution to the UK's economy, and that means that actually we all pay less taxes because of that, and that means that we have a better public services.
Right.
So this actually is a myth, and this is a myth that is fueled by main political parties, and I feel, that's my feeling, what is happening at the moment, we've got elections, general elections in the UK in 2 years' time, and at the moment parties are trying to get votes by scapegoating immigrants and by showing it that all economic problems in this country are caused by immigrants, but they're actually not. Immigrants are the nurses, are the doctors, are the police forces, are our teachers. We contribute a lot of money to the economy, and actually that's immigrants that take less in benefits than British citizens. It's actually that us immigrants, we don't take out everything we are entitled to, and we also need to acknowledge that immigrants do not have the same rights as British citizens. We are only entitled to state help when we have contributed appropriately. What is really concerning me at the moment, and that's why I speak out about it, is the new policies that the government is planning to implement, and mainly 3 new policies. That is social housing, which will mean that soon...
Ella, can I interject here? As a councillor, where I have to look after people who
Okay,
are
Liam, hold on one second, because when you both speak, I can't hear you. Ella, there are a couple of things that I asked Malika to keep me not from being inside cricket, and certain things that you're about to bring up, you only understand if you live in the UK. So just wind up that thought, because I know that Liam is really eager to actually push back. So just wind up the thought, but don't take us through all of the deep depth of the immigrant process.
To wind up, what is happening at the moment in the UK with all the policy, the changes in policy, it is called immigrant apartheid. That means separating immigrants socially from the rest of the society, separating them from basic state help and from access to basic state welfare.
Okay, so Liam, you heard that immigrant apartheid. You have a lot of immigrants living in your borough.
Yes.
How do you respond to Ella?
I was going to say, I mean, immigrants are extremely hardworking, and I have to admit that, I mean, there's no one I've ever met who's from the Eastern European countries or any other countries who aren't extremely hardworking, and I'm not going to argue with that. The problem we have now is that we had uncontrolled immigration under the Labour government for 13 years of over 3 million people of coming into the country. We didn't build houses to cope with 3 million people coming into the country. We haven't had enough, the NHS can't cope with that. We haven't built enough schools to cope with that. That's where we've got to this situation where we have thousands of people on waiting list for social housing, where now we can't actually house them because we have had this influx of people.
Okay.
So it's not that it's actually immigration's a bad thing, it's just we have to deal with the number of people we have now and get on from there.
Ella, just respond very quickly.
If there is just a quick one,
Yeah,
if there's not enough social houses or schools, that means they need to be built, because immigrants bring a wealth of money to this country, and they are the money actually to build those facilities. So that's not an excuse of scapegoat.
Well, can I interject here on some of the numbers? Can I interject here? Ella, I'm afraid your numbers are wrong.
That's not my numbers. That's the Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation, not mine.
There are no definitive studies across the globe that have actually indicated a positive factor when taking all the economic considerations of immigration into this country, or indeed the United States, where most of the studies have actually been done.
All right, so
In fact,
Stephen
the
and
only
Ella, let
studies
me
that
ask
are
you.
close
Let me
to
ask
that-
you something very quickly. So, if we're talking about immigration numbers into the UK, how many numbers are we talking about? How many people are coming?
Well,
into
if you
the
want to
UK?
look at the figures, over the past 10 years, they reckon that it's 4 million immigrants have come into this country over the past 10 years, and that was a policy that the Labour Party had actively undertaken. Mandelson said he sent people across the globe to get as many immigrants into this country so that they could smash the Tories and rub their face into multiculturalism.
Okay, Malika, the community.
Well, I want to bring you back in here with this community tweet from Global Campfire Kiri. He says, is it wrong to want to enforce the legal laws of the land? If people come without legal papers in your country, what would you do? And there's also a Facebook comment that brings up this topic of home again. Daniel says, it's not mainstream anti-immigrant sentiment. It's growing disillusion with mass immigration and becoming a stranger in our own home. So it's that word home. Can you pick up on that? The feeling that some people in our own community say that they don't feel like a home, like they don't feel like they're at home in the UK any longer.
Okay, to deal with the first comment, I would say, of course, the government has to enforce its laws, but I would question how they enforce their laws. They must be enforced fairly and preserving the dignity of each human being in the UK, regardless of where they're from or the colour of their skin. With regards to feeling like a stranger in your own home, I'd want to find out, what do you mean in terms of when you look around people from different countries, or are you talking about people of different races? I think that's obviously a very personal opinion, but I would say that there are plenty of Black and Asian, Eastern European, Western European, Australians, people from all around the world who are now British or who are legal migrants in the UK or undocumented for whatever other reason. We belong here too. Like, there has to be a place, there has to be at least an understanding of where people are at. You can't, it often gets conflated with questions of integration. What I always ask is, what do you want to see? Is it people speaking English? Is it people dressing in Western styles? Whatever it is that you want to see. When you have spot checks, and I forgot to bring this in earlier, when you have spot checks on people's immigration status where they are using racial profiling, what you're saying is, for Black and Asian people in the UK, it doesn't matter what you do to so-called integrate, you don't fit in, you don't belong, you're a second, you can get your citizenship questioned at going about your daily business in a tube station.
All right, I like the fact that we ended this part of our conversation with the voice of a British immigrant, which kind of really helps us just give an overarching view of how complex this conversation is. We're not done yet. We are going to move all of our guests over to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com, so join us there. Let me tell you what we're doing tomorrow. On the next show, oil from Alberta's tar sands is generating big profits for Canada, but is it at the cost of the environment? We'll tell you about an oil spill there that's been leaking for more than 2 months. Stay with us though, the post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. See you online. Thanks for watching. And again, this is the Stream's online post show. Today, a look at anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK and what's fueling it. Let's get right back to that conversation. Malika, the community are chatting a lot about this. Where do you want to take us next?
Well, I thought it was interesting. Just as we ended the main portion of the live TV show, Kiri asked a rhetorical question. If you're in the UK, what do you want to see? What does this society look like for you? Mona wrote in, well done for highlighting all the problems, but what about the solutions? So can, you know, on the backs of your questions, Kiri, can you take us towards what a solution would even look like?
Well, I would say I don't have all the solutions, I would say, but one of the key things would be to fund the under-resourced and understaffed UK border agency. I know that's now been brought in with part of the Home Office, and for the non-UK viewers, that's the government agency that takes care of immigrant affairs. I mean, they've got a backlog stretching back years of asylum and immigration cases. So that would be probably the first thing I would do. The second thing I would call for is just evidence-based policy making. The Labour shadow immigration minister made a speech today in which he had an anecdote about Tesco that turned out not to be true. You know, we can't keep having these silly little anecdotes. Let's talk about facts, figures, a bit like what Ella mentioned. Let's deal with the facts, let's deal with the figures and work out a fair immigration policy that treats everyone with dignity and that responds to the needs of the UK economy.
So Liam, you're part of the Conservative Party. Let me just jump in, if I may, just for a moment. You're part of the Conservative Party, and so the immigration van, the stop and searching for ID, that's part of their immigration policy and trying to kind of keep an eye on where immigration is going. Do you feel that's enough, or are the public pushing back on it?
Well, no, I think actually what we're doing is we're trying to reduce the number of immigrants into the country from the hundreds of thousands. As I say, we came with this figure of 3 or 4 million people in the last decade, down to the tens of thousands. And this is because, as I say, we're not talking about immigration being a bad thing. We're talking about immigration being a problem in the sense that we just need to sort the country out in terms of housing. I mean, house prices have shot up over recent years because of the lack of housing. We have strain on the education system. We have strain on the NHS because of the mass immigration of people into this country. Again, I'm trying to say that it's not a bad thing, but it's the numbers of people that we have to deal with, and that's why we need to get it down into the tens of thousands rather than the hundreds of thousands.
But this is the number of people who provide our services and who provide us with the money to build those facilities. The problem doesn't lie with the number of houses, because we can build them. The problem lies with the attitude.
Where we're going to build them?
Well, I think
where I live, we just do not.
If I can try and address some of these.
Yeah, Stephen, I hear you. So let me just do one quick back and forth with Ella, and then Stephen, we'll go back to you. It's actually turned into night time. They've been waiting so patiently. Ella, very quickly, and then we go to Stephen. Ella.
Yes, the problem does not lie with that. The problem lies with actually discrimination and unequal treatment and scapegoating a large number of UK residents.
Okay, so you made that point earlier, and I get that point. Yeah. But then, so what would you actually? Point. Okay, that's your main point, and you made it beautifully.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
The point is that by creating that social attitudes, then the politicians create policies, and that's the policies that are bad for people, bad for the families that live in the UK, and that's the policies that make people homeless. That's the policies that make people destitute. And that is a real issue, because I work with immigrants, hundreds and hundreds of them, and I see the effects, and I really worry.
All right, so let's go to Stephen. Stephen, jump in.
Well, it's very clear every political party in this country recognises that we've had too much immigration in the past 10 years, and that there are massive problems on schools, education, and we have 1 million young people in this country without jobs. UKIP's policy is very clear, that we believe that we should treat every human being who wants to come to this country equally and fairly, irrespective of which country you are from. And therefore, we want to treat the countries of Europe the same as the rest of the world. At the moment, I believe there's a discrimination there by favouring Europe to the rest of the world. And our view is that we have to take control of immigration by only allowing 50,000 a year, that we would not allow for 5 years any permanent residence until you have proven that you have paid taxes, and that you have to bring your own insurance for health and education if you want to come here. There is no good having 1 million young people unemployed while we bring in low-skilled workers from Europe. What we want to see in this country are very skilled workers coming in.
Okay, so Stephen's fired everybody up. Stephen, I'm just going to ask you something very quickly because everybody else is jumping on top of you. Just so our audience internationally knows this, how many MPs do you have in Parliament right now?
UKIP, none.
None. Okay, that's just so that people understand that you've got those policies out there, but you actually have nobody representing them in Parliament.
Not in the UK. We have 12 MEPs
in the European Parliament, which you'd actually want to get out of Europe. So there's a certain irony in what you're speaking about right now. Malika, the community.
Well, there's a video comment left here about the timing of all of this, the timing of what's been tagged racist vans, and the timing of this policy in general. Liam, I'm going to direct this to you. Have a listen to this video comment.
I think the UK has no choice but to curb immigration because of the social welfare net that they provide. They have people coming to the country for health tourism, education tourism, about 120,000 kids in the education system with no legal status, along with the current violence that they've seen, and the election coming up. This is just a way for the government to sort of appease the majority for the upcoming election.
So would you agree with that? It's just an appeasement policy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't agree with that because I think it's actually dealing and doing the right thing and actually dealing with the problem that we have. I mean, that's why we come into politics, and any of us go into politics is to do the right thing and to help people. I mean, to deal with things like the health system. I know with health tourism, the Member of Parliament for Crawley, Henry Smith MP, he put forward a private members bill to deal with this. And you know, so there are things being done, you know, to deal with this situation of people coming into the United Kingdom. And as I say, you only have to live in my borough for 6 months before you're eligible to go onto social housing and the social housing list. So you can technically be in the country for 6 months and then have a house under the social housing policy, which is wrong.
Liam, what's wrong with that when you pay taxes? You pay a fair share. I can't see any reason why people who live here and pay their fair share and make this country their home to become homeless when something happens. That's fair. And why would you divide people?
I'm saying 6 months for anyone.
I would like to just echo what Ella said. Basically, I mean, we all know, you may not know if you're not from the UK, but if you're coming from outside the UK, on most visa categories, if not all, I think you have no recourse to public funds, so you wouldn't be eligible for public housing. If you're from the EU, referring back to what Ella said, you know, EU migrants pay, I think they more than pay their way. The National Institute for Economic and Social Research has data out showing that, you know, for some of the periods which we're all talking about as this untrammeled boom, that actually, you know, although migrants did come here, they did not increase unemployment or impact on wages. And in some places where youth unemployment was on the rise, even under Labour, that happened in areas of low migration. I would argue that the UK did not do enough on housing, education, schools, housing, and all the other issues that you've mentioned. And I think that it wouldn't have done enough, even with the migrant numbers.
Heavily.
Yeah. But also,
Kiri, those numbers are disputed heavily by Civitas, and they're disputed by other foundations such as the Institute of Economic Affairs. It is absolutely clear that since our membership of the European Union, we have lost 2 million jobs in the last 10 years.
Wouldn't you say that the problem with jobs is things like zero-hour contracts, lack of enforcement of the minimum wage? Since 2010, we have not prosecuted anyone for not paying the minimum wage. We need a living wage. I would argue we're not going far enough.
The fact that we don't have the number of jobs.
Work does not pay.
I hate this moment in the show. Do you know why I hate this moment in the show, everybody?
To end it?
Because it's good and I have to stop. That is nuts. Oh, you hear that? That is my frustration. I want the conversation to continue. The newsroom is looking at me like I've gone crazy. I haven't, but the conversation was so great. I want to say thank you to all of the guests, Stephen Wolf, Kiri Konkwende, Ella Vine, and Liam Marshall-Ascough. Thank you very much for this conversation. I have to say, Malika, that the UK has been talking about immigration since the 1950s, and it comes up regularly. And I think, as we can hear, there's no easy solution. But at least people are talking, which is good. Talking about talking, what are we talking about tomorrow? On Wednesday, oil from Alberta's tar sands is generating big profits for Canada. But is it at the cost of the environment? I'll tell you about an oil spill that's been leaking for more than 2 months. Until then, see you online. Thanks for watching.